up there in the video. I was going to Twitter and then I accidentally closed down YouTube. And you close down YouTube, you close down the video, you get to start all over. So let me just finish this off for you guys. So yeah, first of all, I already spoke about this, but anyway, Restore the Snyderverse WB can make over $1 billion if they simply do this below, and I'll just tell you what it is. Actually, I could actually play it on YouTube. So let's play it on YouTube. Here it is.
So why not put this trilogy out there? You put it out, the first one, Man of Steel, 2 weeks. BVS, 2 weeks. Zack Snyder's Justice League, Part 1, 2 weeks. Zack Snyder's Justice League, Part 2, 2 weeks. IMAX and cinemas. That's what you do. And you see how much money you get back. That's it. You're going to get 90% of your revenue from the cinemas. You have nothing to lose because guess what? Zack Snyder has IMAX versions and cinema versions of all those movies. It's there for you.
Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you guys because once again, you know, it's important to understand what's going on. Mr. Headcanon says the truth behind Superman's box office. I guess they're doing spin to try and to say that, you know, that movie's not a flop. It's a flop. But they're going to spin it. So let's get, Jeff Johns is the greatest Superman writer of all time, says Shine Comics. I disagree with that. I'm sorry, buddy. I disagree with that one. Superman fails to make $1 billion at the box office. The Mighty M. I don't even know who this guy is. I don't even know who the guy is. Why is this speech awful? The Dave Cullen Show. So I'm just showing you what fans are saying. Hey, let me get out of here. Was Superman a flop or a success? I'll tell you everything. So they're trying to spin shit. This is the end of Superman and Fantastic Four at the box office. This is Astro Recargado. I don't even know who these people are. They're just in my feed. I guess. Okay, thoughts on this? Israeli actress Gal Gadot says, people are boycotting my movies because I support Israel. It's not fair. Well, fuck you. That's what I'm going to tell Gal Gadot. It is fair. Because until you stop playing victim and care for the Palestinians and call out the injustice that's going on to them, they should boycott your movies. And you shouldn't return as Wonder Woman. And that's how I feel about that. Why Superman use LED volumes instead of green screens? James Gunn's Superman gives up box office, YouTube, AI, age, verification, insanity. If you like the new Superman, you are part of the problem, says Top Secret Official. Again, these people, let me just make it abundantly clear. These people are not Snyder fans. I don't even know what they're doing in my feed, okay? And he says, this needs to stop. Superman trying to be like Marvel. Superman trainer, Green Lantern, evil Superman, things you missed, emergency, awesome. He just deep dive into Zack Snyder's Justice League with Zack Snyder, Justice Gun. This was 4 years ago, which is very interesting. This moment ruined Superman. This is Sean O'Rourke. Wow. And he did this a couple hours ago. Again, Sean is not particularly a Snyder fan or anything. He's just a guy in the industry. He actually works for Blumhouse. So Sean really doesn't have a leg to play in this. I'm not going to play the video. I don't want to get copyright problems. My 5-year-old comes home from kindergarten, drew K-pop Demon Hunters at school today. By the way, I can tell you this, though. Anime is a big thing now in the world. So people are not really looking at comic books anymore. They're kind of looking at anime. Just for you guys to know, you know. That is being human, not real productions. First impressions of Trinidad and Tobago, is it safe? James Gunn addresses the canceled DCU movie that had a director and writer. Wow. I had my issues with James Gunn's Superman, but I'll say that this is a good approach, working on quality instead of rushing into the project, as well as each project feeling different and unique. This combined with the news that Warner Bros. Is going to focus on putting out more original movies and sticking to only 2 DC movies a year. It's a huge benefit, and hopefully it leads to more polished and unique comic book movies. So not bad. Let's see if this approach pays off. First of all, I'm going to say this. Tex is kissing James Gunn's ass, and Tex is supposed to be a Snyder fan as well. So you got to take everything he says with a pinch of salt. Okay, let's move on. It's already done. James Gunn's already finished writing Superman Family. And this is so weird to me that Jodie's Corner is so critical of James Gunn's Superman movie, and also, even though he doesn't go as far as to stop his shilling for James Gunn, he still is somewhat objective in that he's saying, that speech that Superman made at the end just made no sense. It was not necessary, and that David Cornsett was actually right about, hey man, you didn't, you know, if Superman was Asian, Stephen He, who's a comedian. I think the Asian community didn't like how Superman left the woman to die on the top of the building. This woman right here. Superman is a box office flop. Has James Gunn been demoted? Price of Reason. I remember seeing that. All right, so let's call it a day here. Superman sequel coming sooner than expected. DCU Daily. Oh, so curious. So there's a lot of different things here being said. Liar, Liar, Part 3. James Gunn lied about firing Henry Cavill, and so much more. That's Skywalker Ent. He's a Snyder fan as well. All right. Boycott Superman. How Superman destroyed Israel by accident. Okay. And Wesley Snipes' Blade set to return for Avengers Doomsday. Shout out to the 4KO on that. That sounds good. People like that version of Blade, so yeah, why not? James Gunn Superman cannot catch Henry Cavill's Superman? Nope. That's the reality of the situation. Okay, I am good. I'm good. Even disappointments with the MCU. MCU reboot might be ruined before it started. Listen to this. Wow, Fantastic Four didn't work out, so that's a flop. Superman Behind the Scenes shows how wrong James Gunn is for this film. This is Hold My Dual Shock. So there's a lot of people out here who actually expressing their honest opinions of this, and these are Star Wars fans. They're not necessarily DC fans or Marvel fans, and it's just interesting to see the honesty about this film coming out. All right, so that's basically that. I'm gonna now move to Twitter, like I said I was going to, and here we are. And you already heard what my proposal was, that they put out the Snyderverse trilogy into cinemas. That doesn't cost them a whole set of money to do. They just need to find a time slot for that. Maybe for the fall, they put out the Snyderverse trilogy. The thing about the Snyderverse trilogy is, because Warner Brothers botched up 2 movies, they botched up BVS, and then they really botched up Zack Snyder's Justice League, right? The Justice League that came into theaters was not that. And the BVS was shortened, and a lot of the context and very important parts of the movie that would keep it smooth were removed, right? So it was choppy-ish, and it incoherent in certain places. So why not Warner Brothers? And this is from Damian Anton Vincent. I got this, but I'm not going to put Wonder Woman in there. I'll tell you why. Damian Anton Vincent is talking about modifying Wonder Woman and putting in, changing up the ending, getting Patty Jenkins to come back and change back the ending. And even with the Suicide Squad putting out Air Cut. I'll tell you why. That's great. Don't get me wrong. And those movies are part of the Snyderverse. Don't get me wrong. But here's my problem with that, right? We don't want, how do I put this? We don't want any extra work to be done. If the Air Cut needs a little extra work to be done, we don't want that. We movies that are ready to go into cinemas immediately. This is my argument. Now, you if they're willing to dish out even more money and make the air cut come in there, then we can have that as well. And Damien wanted to have the complete thing, but I'm thinking like, listen, either one or two things. You make the announcement and then you put the movies in the cinema. I think those three movies, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition, or Ultimate Cut, and Zack Snyder's Justice League. You put those three movies into the cinema. Zack Snyder's Justice League has a part 1 and a part 2. And like I said, the part 1 and the part 2, you can play at the same time, just different times of the day. So for example, part 1 will play all morning. It's just a 2-hour movie. And then part 2 plays in the afternoon. So you can watch both parts, but you're just going to have to wait till the afternoon to watch part 2. And you do that for 2 weeks, right? And that experience, particularly this movie was made for IMAX. So the optimal experience would be IMAX. It would be nice if you almost exclusively did it IMAX, but whatever, globally. But if you can't, well, you have an adjustment for cinemas as well. Zack Snyder has all that. So you have those things. It doesn't cost you extra money to do anything. You don't have any production costs. You see what I'm saying? You don't have to put out any money in production costs because everything's already done with these movies. Man of Steel is ready, BVS is ready, and Zack Snyder Justice is ready. Why don't you just put them in the cinemas and see how they go? And the reasoning I gave for that was that if you put these movies in the cinema and the way how they perform for the given time frame that they're in, and they deliver money to you and interest in DC, that should be able to give you a green light. Okay, we need to do this on a bigger scale. We need to continue Zack Snyder's Justice League. We need to have sequels to that. You see? And this would be exclusively to the sequels for Zack Snyder's Justice League. That had nothing to do with Ben Affleck's movie or whatever. But here's the thing. If Zack Snyder's Justice League sequels are very successful, or let's say these movies are very successful, that'll imply maybe we should release the air cut. Because if you release the Snyder Cut, remember the theatrical release for the Snyder Cut is Justice League in the theaters. Now, remember the DCEU is over, right? That's done. We have a whole new universe that Gunn is doing. So now the DCEU cannot be affected in a negative way because the DCEU basically is now not canon anymore, right? James Gunn is doing something totally different. So that allows us now to retcon certain things. Like for instance, Justice League 2017, we can retcon it and have the Zack Snyder's Justice League be the canon now for that and continue a parallel or another universe, which has to do with the Snyderverse, which is restore the Snyderverse. And one of the ways for the studio to do that, there's several different ways you can go about doing it. But my suggestion is one of the ways the studio can do that is if everybody liked Man of Steel, you bring out Man of Steel. If the people preferred Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition, you put out Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice Ultimate Cut. And you put it in the cinemas. That'll be the longest movie of all of them, right? Because you're not going to break that up into parts. That's going straight. You're going for 3 hours and 30 minutes in the cinema, right? So you start off with Man of Steel. You give that a 2-week run, right? You see how it performs, right? You only need 2 weeks. We're not going full-fledged 6 weeks. 6 weeks would be no, because we want to do these movies one after the other. We want people to feel what the trilogy feels like. They've made a ton of money off of DVDs and Blu-rays. They've made a ton of money off of the digital release, right? With this trilogy. So why don't you put the trilogy now into cinemas as it ought to be put? Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition has never seen theaters on a global scale. Right or wrong? Zack Snyder's Justice League has never seen theaters at all on a global scale. Right or wrong? Put it in the theaters now. And I'm sure they can clear out a space and window. All you need is 6 weeks. You're starting off. It's what do we call this? The trilogy. What do we call this? The trilogy. We call it the trilogy. Whatever. It's 6 weeks. It's a month. It's a month and a half, right? So a month and a half, we're having the Snyderverse trilogy. You started with Man of Steel, right? And it's a global campaign. You want it to be global. You reintroduce Man of Steel. So Man of Steel is getting reinserted into cinemas for 2 weeks. You're not going beyond 2 weeks. There's no need for that. People have seen it before and all that. It's an old movie. It's 12 years old. Then you go to Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, Ultimate Cut or Ultimate Edition. You put that into cinemas for 2 weeks. No longer. But you're getting that nice little flow of the trilogy, right? And then finally, you put Zack Snyder's Justice League into theaters for 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. Right? And see how much money it makes. If that movie, if Zack Snyder's Justice League, for example, it's doing extremely well in theaters, then the theaters will ask you to retain it into their theaters and to play it longer. So it may get a longer shelf life. You may end up at the end of 2 weeks saying, okay, let's extend it a little longer because it's making money. Because Batman v Superman, people have seen the Ultimate Edition, but the world hasn't seen that version. And by similar standards, a lot of people have seen Zack Snyder's Justice League, but they've never seen it in theaters, and the world hasn't seen that. That's how you cleanse your palate of all the shit that went before. And now you can do Zack Snyder Justice League 2 and 3. Now, with respect to Wonder Woman and Aircut, I believe Aircut will have some work that will have to still be done to it. And Wonder Woman, to change the ending so that it matches up with Zack Snyder Justice League, will need some work to be added to it. You can do the Aircut after, and then you can do, because Wonder Woman comes after the Aircut, you can do Wonder Woman after. And then you can do Zack Snyder's Justice League again after, just so people can get the flow of it. The Aircut, again, if you're going to put it into cinemas, and it will do well, put it into cinemas for 2 weeks. You're not going to try and do a whole run. Just do 2 weeks. You're testing out something. Wonder Woman, you change up the ending, you put it into cinemas, 2 weeks. And then the Snyder Cut that comes after that, okay, just another 6-week thing, right? It's a month and a half. The Snyder Cut that comes after that, so you have like another trilogy going, right? If it worked out well with the first trilogy, then you put the second trilogy going, right? Now, the thing about it is, the monies that you accrue from, say, for example, Zack Snyder Justice League would probably be added to Justice League's box office, unfortunately, and Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition would be added to Batman v Superman's theatrical box office. So it'll increase that box office. And similarly, the Aircut, any additional money you make from that will be added to Studio Squad's box office, and any additional stuff you do with Wonder Woman, even if there's some changes, will be added to Wonder Woman's box office. But here's the thing. The next time you do Zack Snyder's Justice League, you add in the Green Lantern scene that was missing from it. You put that back in there with Martian Manhunter. So you can do the run where you have no changes, but the revenue that's generated from that run, you can take some of that revenue and finance the finishing of the Aircut, finance the changing up of the ending of Wonder Woman, bring back Patty Jenkins to do that. You can also finance the Green Lantern scene in Zack Snyder's Justice League and add that in. Now, a lot of people will say, but there's a Green Lantern show that's coming out 2027 or 2026. Yeah, that has nothing to do, Zack Snyder Justice League has nothing to do with that Green Lantern scene or the Green Lantern show. That's what you need to understand. DC is able to run two different things and nobody gets confused by it. We had the CW and we had movies. Now we'll have the Gunverse and then we'll have the Snyderverse. You're not going to get confused because the Gunverse looks distinctly different to the Snyderverse. The Snyderverse has a Snyderverse look. The Gunverse has a Gunverse look. Right? So you're not going to be, that's the nice thing about the Snyderverse. The aesthetic of the Snyderverse is a certain way. The stories of the Snyderverse are different, right? The Gunverse, the aesthetic is different. The stories are going to be different. So you're not going to confuse them. It's like I said, the CW looks different to the when the Snyderverse was there, right? Here's the thing though, and this is the beauty of it all. There's a propensity for the Snyderverse to help the Gunverse, and vice versa. We have seen the Flash crossover from the Snyderverse crossover into the CW, didn't we not? Well, he wasn't acting like the Snyderverse Flash, but nonetheless, right? So my point being, with the Flash from CW, my point being, we are in a multiverse. And if the Snyderverse needs to help the Gunverse to pick it up, characters from the Snyderverse can move across to the Gunverse. It's a multiverse. So you can have, the multiverse opens up, and then you can have an interchange. Furthermore, Warner Bros. Can have two approaches to Marvel. What do I mean by this? When you want to do the Marvel crossover, now you have more options. You can go through the Snyderverse first, or you can go to the Gunverse first. But people need to put aside their egos and think what is best for this company and what will make the most amount of money. Not about which fan base thinks that this should be seen or not. You let the Snyderverse go first again. You let it jump ahead of the Gunverse, and here's what will happen. And again, you notice I'm not saying destroy the Gunverse. I'm not talking about that because, again, DC has many different stories. And even though James Gunn may not be following, it may not be the most comic book accurate, he may even be butchering what Superman is, we don't know where his story is going. Let's see the story go to wherever it's going. But the point I'm making is this. And I don't even know if James Gunn will be there, to be honest with you. It may be just, it might just end up being the Snyderverse. But here's what I'm saying. The Snyderverse could be used to jumpstart the Gunverse. For those of you who love James Gunn and what he's doing, you should be working hand in hand with us. DC fans should be working with other DC fans to see a compromisable result. In fact, you guys should be pushing so hard for Restore the Snyderverse. If you're a James Gunn fans, you should be pushing hard for the Snyderverse. You know why? Because when you have those options out there, you never know when the Gunverse might cross over with the Snyderverse, or the Snyderverse might cross over with the Gunverse. Now you have options. You got the Snyderverse crossover with Marvel, the MCU, through Deadpool, or you have the Gunverse who could cross over with the MCU through just the normal MCU because of the similar tone. Or you could have the Snyderverse crossover with the Gunverse. Or you could have the Gunverse crossover with the Snyderverse. So you have some of James Gunn's characters and James Gunn probably directing them in a Snyderverse movie where you see the contrast between those worlds and the Snyderverse worlds. And James Gunn's already doing it with Peacemaker. He's already starting to do the multiverse where you have other worlds where Peacemaker can go. Well, if he's doing that there, then it can happen where he crosses over, he could cross over into any universe, including Marvel Universe. So I'm just showing you how, as much as James Gunn is failing right now, if he works, you have to put your egos aside. He's very narcissistic. That's the problem with the guy. When you put aside your ego and you put aside you wanting to be first with everything, if somebody else is, this is what we talk about with team spirit. If we're all on the same fucking team, we're all DC fans, and we have a DC audience, then we have to work together. And some of you will be like, I don't want to work with James Gunn. I want nothing to do with James Gunn. I get you. And I agree. I don't really like James Gunn's movies. The only movie I ever actually liked of James Gunn's stuff is Guardians of the Galaxy 2. That was it. And I'm not really a James Gunn fan either. But here's the thing. The thing is, if Warner Brothers wants to have what they want, because obviously this is the studio that wants to go this direction, then they need to think in very concrete terms. You have Matt Reeves, the Batman. That's a microcosm in itself right there. You could have the Snyderverse, which is going to probably be their strongest DC property, to be honest with you, because it's still the most creative, innovative, and interesting property out of everything that DC has. Okay, but we're saying, okay, you want to push the Gunverse. Then if you're gonna push the Gunverse, you need to push Matt Reeves verse, and James Gunn needs to get his own Batman and have his own thing in his own universe, because you're gonna work your own universe, and let Matt Reeves work his own standalone thing and finish off his standalone thing. And if he wants to continue a universe there, let him continue. Zack Snyder has a vision for what he would like. Why don't you let him do it so that everybody's satisfied? You have the Batman fans who are satisfied because Matt Reeves, they think Matt Reeves' version is what Batman is. They're satisfied. You have the bright, sunny, Coskel Superman fans, Christopher Reeves kissing, butt ass kissing fans who like their version of Superman, even though James Gunn isn't really quite doing that. Nonetheless, they follow James Gunn. And then you have the Snyderverse fans, right? And instead of jokes and all of that stuff, you get more concrete, solid stuff. Now, maybe most of the DC audience watches the Snyderverse stuff, and they don't so much support James Gunn stuff. But I'm going to tell you this. They will be more positive towards James Gunn stuff, and even Matt Reeves stuff, you might get more support if you restore the Snyderverse. Because that thing got money in it. And the critics are now warming up to Zack Snyder's style. And they realize there's a big fan base for Zack Snyder's stuff, and they need to respect that when it comes to DC. So, and the thing about Zack Snyder is he wanted to put Watchmen into that universe. He wanted to really mix in things and really have some fun. And so, there's no way in hell I'm going to ever stop saying restore the Snyderverse till it happens, because I know Zack Snyder had a lot of good stuff for us. And I know a lot of people are equally as excited about that as I am. Now, like I said, if you do the Snyderverse trilogy, and then afterwards you want to put out the Ayer cut, and then you want to put out the Wonder Woman with the adjusted ending, and then you want to put out Zack Snyder's Justice League with the Green Lantern scene at the end, the kind of the cream on the top, kind of modifying the movies so they all look modified, right? Because you got this little cash from your cash flow that you made with the Snyderverse trilogy. Because the Snyderverse trilogy, I'm going to tell you this: why putting the Snyderverse trilogy into theaters is going to make money. It doesn't matter how many times people have seen it on small screens, on television screens. It's not the same as seeing it in IMAX or seeing it on a big screen. It's just not the same. And that experience people want. And I'm going to tell you right now, the demand for that is going to be so crazy because of when people saw James Gunn's Superman, they wanted a palate cleanse, right? I didn't go see James Gunn's Superman because I knew that was not a movie for me. So what I'm saying to you is, you do that and you will see how it just really pushes the comic book movie industry in a whole other direction. And then the other thing that will be left is to see if people will still be purchasing comic books, because the thing about comic books is we're not really in an age where people are purchasing physical media anymore like that. It's now digital. So that's what's kind of changing up the game, why comic books do not as much comic book sales as before. Generally speaking, it doesn't matter what. Anime has more sales than comic books, and manga. So I would say that Zack Snyder's Justice League is the way to go. You want to get to Zack Snyder's Justice League. And what's the funny thing about it? Warner Bros. Was pushing for this Justice League movie. They want a Justice League movie. And they tried again with a Justice League movie with James Gunn. They were like, hey, James Gunn, forget the Superman solo. You like to do ensembles. Push the Justice League movie, right? The thing about that is that now you have a Justice League movie. Now you have a Justice League movie that most people like. Critics like it, the public likes it, and you don't want to put that Justice League movie out. I mean, that's the stupidity of this people. They rush to try and get to the Justice League, so they're trying to be like Marvel. We want to be like Marvel. You finally get what you want after you fucked it up, and you don't want to put it in cinemas. This is the stupidity of this company. It's like the dumbest. Like, I don't understand how they could be so stupid. The people who run the company, but they are apparently very stupid. So you have intelligent, stupid people. So anyway, that's what it needs to be done. It's almost minutes to 5. I'm still gonna go out and do some sales and come back. But I will let people know with no uncertain terms that if whoever has influence and power, whether it's Abdi and DeLuca, whether it's some other company that has to buy out or Warner Brothers, because their stock is it's very, very low, or administrative change, whatever needs to be happening. Because as I said before, Paramount is going back to Michael Bay with the Transformers movies. They realize Michael Bay is the guy to get these movies to really make money. And I truly believe that DC at some point is going to find out that Zack Snyder was the guy. And it's not easy to find these people. See, that's the thing. A lot of people think this is easy to do. Superman's easy to do, man. That's one of the easiest characters to do. He's not. He never has been. Okay? You still only have 2 directors out of 8 directors, 9, 10 directors that have directed Superman in the movies. 2 out of 10. That's like 1/5 of that. And the only 2 directors who have successfully debuted and launched Superman are Richard Donner and Zack Snyder, both of which either affiliates of Warner Brothers or Warner Brothers itself have fired. Why? You think these guys come every day? Again, you look at guys like Henry Cavill. You look at guys like Christopher Reeve. We're talking movies. We're not talking television. We have so many other Supermen that have tried besides Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve was never successful without Richard Donner. Those first 2 Superman movies, mostly Richard Donner's work, Christopher Reeve was successful. After they removed Richard Donner, same Richard Lester was used to do Superman 3, failed. Superman 4, failed. Supergirl, failed. When will the studio learn that when you get somebody who can make Superman fiscally viable, you keep them? When will they learn that? So this has happened a long time ago. And then they tried Superman Returns. That failed. Okay? They've tried to launch the universe a number of times. They tried with the Green Lantern route. I'm going to say this as well. Jeff Johns is a hell of a writer. Don't get it twisted. But he's not a movie maker. And Jeff Johns needs to understand that. He's a consultant, but he's not a movie maker. He has a track record of making crappy movies and making crappy decisions when it comes to movies. The world is not the same as 1978. It's not the same as 1938. We need to understand that. Things evolve, things change. And his concept of Superman is infantile and juvenile to some degree. And also, it may translate in the comics, but it doesn't translate to real life. James Gunn tried to make something happen, but he doesn't understand Superman. So they need to apologize to Zack Snyder, that company, and they need to go to him and ask him if he is willing to release the Zack Snyder trilogy in cinemas and gear up for that to happen. And they cannot wait to do this. They need to do this before this year ends, which means they need to do it in the fall, which may seem very soon to them, but that's when they need to do it. And it doesn't really matter that James Gunn's Superman movie came out. You start in the fall, and you will work your way all the way into the summer of next year, where you can do the Air Cut, Wonder Woman, and Snyder Cut. And this all depends on how Man of Steel, BVS, and the Snyder Cut do this year. That's how they have to do it. Otherwise, you're gonna lose your fans. You're gonna lose everybody. Your Supergirl movie is gonna do even worse. I know Supergirl is supposed to come out in the summer, but if the Snyderverse is successful, if these movies are successful, it's going to help the Gunverse because it's going to draw more eyes to DC. DC standard and bar is going to go up, and so whatever James Gunn does with Supergirl, uh, it could still flop, but it'll have a better chance of doing well, especially if they try to tie in. I don't know how to say it. Kind of piggyback off of the Snyderverse. You see, if they can piggyback off the Snyderverse, what I mean by that is you start to reference the Snyderverse. You start to reference, you don't have to okay, so the Snyderverse is there, right? So you don't have to actually be in the Snyderverse for that. And I already saw that James Gunn has done a collab with Zack Snyder on I forgot what the name of the cartoon is. He's done a collaboration with Zack Snyder. So what I'm saying is, if Gunn and Snyder can work together, which they probably can, and once Gunn is not too much of a narcissist, Snyder's success. It's kind of like when they matched Barbie with Oppenheimer. They match up Barbie with Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, and Barbie became a success because Oppenheimer kind of rode off the coattails of Oppenheimer. They need to do that same thing with the Snyderverse, but it has to be present. And it has to be something that actually is going to happen so people can anticipate it. See, what got the Marvel fans all riled up was Endgame and the fact that that the Avengers were finally going to meet up and face Thanos. That's what kept them. Some of the movies were shit, but they would. The same thing needs to happen with DC. DC needs to have these major events where the great heroes are going to be matched up against the great big baddie. And if you don't do that, there's no reason for the DC fans to be interested in pursuing that. So that's why the Snyderverse is necessary. And James Gunn, I don't care what he says, nothing he does can be on that scale. We have already tasted what Epic feels like and what Zack Snyder can do. And nobody's going to change their mind on it. You have to, and they're going to continue to ask for it. As they're asking for Constantine 20 years later, they're going to continue to ask for the Snyderverse to be restored until it happens. And the other cool thing about it is the Snyderverse can hold all kinds of things. So it can hold Constantine, it can hold the Watchmen. The prospects behind this is so ridiculous, it's not funny. What the Snyderverse could do and how far they can go with the Snyderverse. And it could be a multi-billion-dollar franchise, okay? On which now you can have James Gunn experiment, do his thing, be as gunny as he wants to be. And again, I think the studios are holding back James Gunn from being what he is by chopping up his movie and cutting his runtime. And he had to try and make sense of it. And maybe his movies are not for everybody, but at the end of the day, it's about giving the creatives the freedom to do what they do, And that's the thing that I think is sad about this whole thing, that the studio was adverse towards one creative and then allowed the creative to do what he wanted to do and then reined in that creative last minute and had to mess up everything. And he somehow had to juggle all that. Because James Gunn, I'm sure, if allowed to tell his story his way, as atrocious as it might be, would probably have had a better storyline than the storyline he came up with, that he presented to into the cinemas. You know what I mean? You have to understand, creatives need the opportunity to breathe and to tell their stories. And I don't care how terrible James Gunn's story might have been of Superman. We want to hear his view. We don't want a studio interfering with that. And the studio continuously does this, right? It interfered with James Wan's story. It interfered with Andy Muschietti's story. It interfered with what's her name? The Wonder Woman lady. Patty Jenkins' story, right? They've been tampering, and that's why Aquaman can't make $1 billion again. James Wan wanted to tell a certain story, and they just fucked him over. And you can't be doing that with creatives. And why are you doing it with creatives? Todd Phillips shouldn't even be doing Joker 2. He shouldn't have been doing Joker 2. But the studio wanted that. So the other thing, directors need to double down on what they are doing and what they're not doing. And if they get fired for it, fine. But you cannot be doing substandard work because a studio keeps on giving you notes. Um, and I couldn't care less what James Wan's taste in movies are. When he's directing a film, nobody should interrupt him or tamper with his film. Once he's not directing a film, he should leave creators and directors to do what they think is best for their film and how to troubleshoot it and stuff. Because I tell you, when you have to work out a problem yourself and you have to stress yourself out trying to get that result, there's no cooperate, nothing. It's 100% your singular vision. You get a better product usually. And you get something a perspective that you may not have thought about. So that's how I look at this. Let's just go through some of these things here. Mental Detector says not a single person has even said anything substantive about Ghost Lex Luthor. He looks the part, but much like the film, everything on the surface with no nuance or depth to him. He brings nothing new to the character. Snyder's Lex Luthor is light years away from and way more layered, which is true. Right? Jay-Z Pitt says the WB mishandled, killed off the DCU, rebooted it, got the oh-so-precious critical acclaim they so clearly wanted, all to produce a film that sold millions less tickets than its predecessor and won't be able to match Man of Steel's box office run. Exactly. These are all Snyder fans, by the way. Movies and Games Related said, what the fuck is this? Jesus. This is what some of y'all are calling peak? Real News College Digital says, you're going to tell me this isn't from the same people that just made Superman? Correct. Too much comedy, bro. All that hype, all these high scores, yet still falling way behind Man of Steel. Yep. Mariano Navarro says, at the end of the day, this is what really matters. It failed. They justified the reboot, alleging no one cared enough about the previous thing and it wasn't profitable. Well, this one made no profit, made less money, and only half as many people went to see it. So now what? Ethan says, now who's the loud minority at James Gunn? And clearly it's not the Snyder fans. Casey Michael Mann area. Goyer Snyder Terrier created a Superman who doesn't allow his personal feelings to get in the way of saving lives or treating people fairly. Gunn created a Superman who screams and lashes out at people he's mad at or dating because James Gunn genuinely thinks retaliation is mature. Yeah. So this is Snyder Superman protecting Lex Luthor from Doomsday. He eventually loses his life, even though Lex Luthor created Doomsday to destroy him. And then Gunn Superman, when Crypto attacks Lex Luthor, he just stands at the side and says, hey, stop, instead of tackling the dog and making sure he stops. Y'all are dragging on Zack Snyder's Superman killing General Zod, but y'all didn't complain about James Gunn's Superman killing these people. Yep. And there you see the clone there going there into the black gold. And this is Free Palestine. Dr. Matt Gilbert says, I'm watching, as I'm sure many of you are, the live broadcast from the White House with the European leaders and Zelensky flattering and groveling before Trump. But worst of all, this group of all-white power figures keeps repeating the same mantra. We have to stop the killing and save the children in Ukraine, yet not a single mention of Gaza or the killings happening there. We are witnessing in front of cameras what Europe's colonial leaders are willing to unite around just a few hours' notice, while they're effortlessly allowing 2.2 million brown people to be starved and slaughtered in Gaza. Shocking, sickening, hypocritical. And as Macron said to Trump, you can count on us, Dr. Mads. Thank you, sir. Always hold on to Smallville. They were in Smallville starter pack. So yes, the Lois Lane that was in Man of Steel was in Smallville. Mr. Batista, he was in Smallville. I do not know who that person is. I know this actress, but I just don't know her name. John Baker says, I love this scene. Lex was a maniacal genius that manipulated every event in BVS. One of the best versions of Lex, in my opinion. Yeah, the thing about it is, 2020 vision is in retrospect, right? You begin to realize how good you had it. Constantine, shout out to Constantine. It couldn't even pass Man of Steel. Yep. DC Studios executives tried to explain to investors how a reboot that made less than the original is still worth it. Yep. And a flop reboot at that. Good God. Hamad says, Zack Snyder fans getting the last laugh in this summer's Superman battle by Sean O'Connell. But behind the scenes, primarily on the dark corners of social media, where a lot of us choose not to lurk, a different battle was being waged between Superman enthusiasts and the vocal fans who prefer Zack Snyder's darker, more mature take on The Man of Steel. That group actively campaigned against James Gunn's new movie, thinking that a box office flop would validate their complaints that the DC universe needed a reboot at all. And the weird thing is, they're going to win the debate. WB Sabotage. By the way, let me just make this abundantly clear. All that wallets, clothes, and don't go and watch Gun Superman. Listen, all of that, I'm going to be real with y'all. All of that didn't matter. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. And you can claim victory for that, but that had nothing to do with it. The truth is, the general people, the general public, especially abroad, wasn't feeling Superman. End of story. They just wasn't feeling him. If the GA wants to go ahead and see a film, they go and see a film. I think the advertising for Superman was just atrocious. In the United States, it seemed as though they went after the crypto thing. But again, the merchandise is not selling off the shelves. Not even the crypto thing is selling as much. So I'm not really sure. I think that the studio padded ticket sales. I think the studio spent money, bought up tickets to make it look, the optics that, Superman was doing well domestically. Can we all agree that Fiora is better than the engineer? 100%. The engineer is trying to look vicious and trying to look mean. Fiora was just ice cold. She was just fucking like a machine, motherfucking ice cold. Look at her face. Make Zack Snyder's Justice League 2. The time is now. Yup, it is now. But I would suggest to Warner Brothers first, you put out the Snyderverse movies, the Snyderverse trilogy, test the waters, and depending on the results you get, yeah, make another one if it's positive. Ain't no way I'm fucking wrong about this. Lex Luthor is greater than Lex Luthor and Superman. Yep. Nobody can tell me that Batman v Superman was a bad movie. No, it wasn't. Especially the Ultimate Edition. All right, now I want you guys to listen to this. This is a very important thing. Fight Back Podcast. Trump is obviously in the Epstein files. What if Donald Trump wasn't the one being blackmailed, but actually is a part of the blackmail ring? Here we go.
Funded it.
Get ready.
Mega Group became the original corporation for the sex trafficking ring that we now know. Why? Because Wexner put Epstein in charge of Mega Group. So Bronfman, Wexner, Spielberg are the heads, and they funded it. And now Epstein became the face running it, and Maxwell. They fully knew that these people were Mossad agents. So this became a Mossad operation, and it was also even an Israeli lobby firm for politics. So they used the funding to lobby for Israeli politics. They use the connections to sex traffic children all over the world, and they use their connections with the banks to fund this and to keep it all under the radar. This is the basis of the child trafficking ring that we saw today. So I grew up around all of these people. I grew up in this life. Their fucking lieutenant was my godfather when I was born. So when I say I have a unique perspective on these people, you should fucking listen to me. And I'm telling you right now that Trump and Epstein were best friends. This is another MAGA sticking point where they need to get it through their head, because you can talk to a MAGA person and they go, oh, no, they were just acquaintances. They didn't really know each other. Even though they're in like 700 photos together, more photos with him than anyone else in the friggin' world, they will deny it. Meanwhile, if you have a computer or a phone, anybody watching this right now, go on Google right now and Google Epstein, Donald's closest friend. One of the first 3 search results, depending on which country you happen to be in, will be an official us.house.gov website where there is a interview with Jeffrey Epstein that was audio recorded and then transcribed and submitted to the government as court evidence. So this is Epstein's voice, Epstein's words, submitted to the U.S. government and now online for download in a U.S. government website. And I can send you the screenshots, whatever you want. The very first question they asked him was, how close were you to Donald Trump? And the direct quote from Jeffrey Epstein, ladies and gentlemen, recorded in a government document filed to the government is, I was Donald's closest friend for 10 years.
Wow.
Period.
He's also flown on his jet 7 times, and Donald has his own jet. So when you both have your own jets and you're flying that many times together, that says a lot. These are busy guys that don't really change their schedules around. Like someone like Donald's the kind of guy that'll be like, oh, like for me, like when we travel somewhere, we usually don't change your schedules around to match your friends. Just go. So if you're changing your schedule when you have your own jet, that says a lot. I haven't flown in anyone's private jet 7 times.
And did you know that Epstein is the one that introduced Ivana to Donald Trump? And I'm not talking about Ivanka, his daughter. We're talking about Ivana, his wife in the late 80s. Epstein, his acquaintance, not his friend, introduced him to his wife. And by the way, how did their marriage end and why did their marriage end? Does everybody know this? You know?
No.
In 1989, Donald Trump raped his wife, Ivana. She had him arrested for the rape, and he was forced to pay her a $10 million settlement and slapped her with a gag order, so she was not allowed to talk about it, and she had to literally change her statement wording from rape to forced unwanted sex, so he wouldn't get a rape charge and have to go to jail. So he paid his ex-wife $10 million after raping her, and then to get that money back, this is how sadistic Trump is. Do you know what he did to his wife, his ex-wife?
What did he do? No,
well, first of all, she died under mysterious circumstances, alone in her house, fell down the stairs.
Oh, wow.
Okay, that's already weird as fuck. Then guess what he did with her body?
What did he do with it?
He brought her body to his golf course in New Jersey, and he buried her on the golf course so he could then go and get the golf course registered as a non-profit cemetery so he wouldn't have to pay property taxes or land transfer tax when he sells the property. So he literally put her in her own lonely grave in an area. She doesn't even have a headstone. She just has one of those plaques on the floor, and it's his ex-wife, and he buried her body on his golf course so he can save money in taxes.
Yeah, it's insane. Not to get too off subject, but you see RFK, he had a wife who was also good friends with Ghislaine Maxwell, killed herself under mysterious situations, and then she was buried. He dug her body up with no permits and moved it to this weird, like, different cemetery. And you never dig up bodies with no, this is pretty much unheard of, but no criminal charges are pressed against them. It's just absolutely insane.
Crazy. I never knew that. He should have been in jail, like, instantly.
Yeah, I never heard of these things either. Like you said, I never heard of Trump. This stuff is insane. It's like almost like when you look up these guys, you don't want to hear this stuff. And me being an ex-Trump supporter, I would maybe purposely not see this stuff. And the RFK, I was a supporter of him too, but I started seeing stuff like this and like, who's going to dig up a body without permits? Like no one does. That's completely unheard of, and move it out of the cemetery. And when she hung herself, her hands were in the noose. It was one of those mysterious things. She would, you know, again, he would Epstein would loan him his plane. Like, these guys don't loan people planes. This is like kind of something weird going on.
Definitely something weird. And in that government document, by the way, that Epstein claims and says that Trump was his closest friend, it also has an entire presentation of all the places they went together. So think about this. They're telling you that they're just acquaintances. Meanwhile, they went to the Playboy Mansion together multiple times. They went to Victoria's Secret fashion shows multiple times, which we know was owned by Wexner, which we know was a pedophile partner of Epstein. They went to the Miss America and Teen America pageants because Trump owned both of them. And Trump even admitted that he would walk into the dressing rooms and see the girls naked, including the underage girls as young as 14, and made a joke about it. And his supporters are like, oh, he was just joking. No, he literally tells me he walked in on them and he could do it because he's the owner. They also went to Diddy parties together. They also, like you said, flew on his jet. They went to his casino together. We found out the other day when they went to the casino together, they had 19-year-old girls that weren't old enough to be in the casino. So the only reason they were going there was to go to the hotel. So Trump was married, but going to hotels with Epstein and 3 19-year-old girls because, you know, Trump never did anything. He never had sex with any girls with Epstein, and him and Epstein weren't friends, even though Epstein himself said they were best friends. But hey,
yeah, clearly they were doing stuff together that wasn't good. Whether it was legal or not, you can't say. But it's pretty clear Trump's also in the Epstein files. Like when Elon Musk said you're in the files, if you weren't in the files, you'd just be, no, I'm fucking not. Now, what he's in there for...
All right, here's one more. The US, UK, and Israel are rogue terrorist states. West Asia, Middle East is often dismissed by the West as harboring terrorism and promoting destruction. They forget their own role in doing the exact same thing. The call is coming from inside the house. This is in Iraq. You see US troops burning the fuck out of the land for no fucking reason at all. All right. The feat of structuring Zack Snyder's Justice League to have Superman's resurrection line up with his death in the previous movie isn't praised enough. Also in BVS itself, the movie ending exactly 1 hour after Lex sets his timer on the rooftop for an hour is freaking phenomenal. Restore the Snyderverse. The people calling people defending their right to live on their land with dignity and did this type of shit all over the Middle East. Miss me with your labels. Killing our sheep there. A guy's Palestinian sheep, and he's really killing that thing, man. So that's basically that. I'm not gonna go into too much more. Casey Michaelman era says we're being lectured on colors by people who need their eyes checked. As you can clearly see, Man of Steel, the um, colored version, really looks much better. We need Darkseid. Insist on quality. Make Zack Snyder Justice League 2. Yes, sir. 80% of Rotten Tomato critics aren't actually educated film critics. They're random bloggers and YouTubers who have never studied or worked in film. Their opinion isn't worth shit. The evidence is below. So that's about it for me. I'm going to stop right here. I hope you guys have a great day.